Chair, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Service Select Committee. My name is Councillor Wayne Bridges and I'm Chairman of this meeting. The key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. And for those in the public gallery, you will not be on camera. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn the microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. The fire alarm, we're not expecting one this evening. However, if one does sound, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre forecourt. Mobile devices to be placed on silent or switched off, and we also have residents' feedback forms available at the back of the room and underneath the broadcast. Before I go on to the main agenda, I will allow any members who wish to do so to take off their jackets due to the heat in this room. You're more than welcome to do so. Only members. Well, actually, we'll extend that to the officers as well if they wish to do so. We go on to the main agenda, please. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Smallwood, with Councillor Lewis substituting.
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to Councillor Lewis. Declaration of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Are there any? I can see no indication. Item 3 is to receive the minutes of the previous meeting dated the 13th of June, pages 1 to 10. Can we agree those are correct? Thank you very much. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in Part 1. There are no Part 2 items to be considered, which moves us on to Item 5, our review of the Homelessness and Customer Journey Witness Session 4. This evening we have a range of witnesses. We have from our officer's side, Dan Kennedy, Melissa Blur, and we have Rachel and Amal from the NHS social prescribers. And we also have some other members who aren't here as yet, but they may come throughout the meeting perhaps, but we'll see how that goes. So I will open up with Dan, if you wish to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Chair. And just to remind everybody, this is the major review that the Select Committee have chosen this year, looking into the customer journey for the Homelessness and Housing Needs Service. We've had a series of witnesses to date, and welcome our colleagues from IDVA, who would first of all, I suppose, like to hand over the mic and allow them to talk about their experiences. We, subject to obviously the other witnesses arriving, we'll invite them to speak, and then Melissa and I would then like to give an overview of the improvement plan we have in place that's been running for the last 9 to 10 months, and some of the highlights from that. But if I can hand over to IDVA first of all, that would be lovely.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us here today. So my name is Sonia Stewart and I manage HDAS, which is the Hillingdon Domestic Abuse Advocacy Service. And
hi, my name is Sultana Ahmed. I am the senior IDVA, working under Sonia.
So just a little overview of the service. So we are the Hillingdon Domestic Abuse Advocacy Service. So just a little bit of background in that 2 years ago, so prior to 2 years ago, we were the IDVA service, which is the service that deals with high-risk victims of domestic abuse. But 2 years ago, the service evolved, and so then we expanded, and we also now include the floating support side of the service as well. So now we support victims who are experiencing all levels of domestic abuse, so from low, medium, and too high. Within the service, we have 5 IDVAs. IDVA stands for Independent Domestic Violence Advocate, and we have 3 floating support workers. So the IDVAs will work with victims who are at high risk of domestic abuse. They provide crisis intervention, and their intervention is more kind of short term in terms of identifying the risk and managing that risk and helping reduce. And then the floating support side work with more long-term support for those victims who are deemed kind of low to medium risk. So we provide support across the spectrum in terms of risk. So So in terms of, are we kind of talking about our experiences with housing? Okay. So we have had a conversation within the team just to get some feedback from the team members within HDAS and also from clients' experiences as well. And so we've put together a few points that we just wanted to raise. So one of the concerns that we've noticed when victims are presenting to housing, one of the main things that they're kind of asked in the first instance is whether there's been a call out to the police. And we have kind of been asked that a lot from housing officers in terms of has there been a police call out, because that can kind of, the inferences that it could go against that victim approaching or receiving any support around accessing housing support. Obviously that's quite a concerning response in terms that not all victims of domestic abuse are going to want to involve the police or report anything for various reasons. They may have been threatened by their perpetrator, that their children are going to be removed or they're going to be killed if they involve the police. And obviously, just because the police have not been called out, it doesn't mean that there's no domestic abuse occurring in that family environment. So that is something that we have been are presented with when victims are approaching. The other concern sometimes we have is that when victims are approaching, they've fled an emergency situation in the home. There may have been a physical violent incident. They're not always going to have access to their documentation. And obviously that's something that is really needed when you're approaching and you're looking for housing support. And that's a real concern, because if you're fleeing, you're not always going to be thinking to yourself that I need to get my passport, I need to get my driving license, or that you need to be making sure that you've got your ID on you when you're leaving. And sometimes victims can be penalised for that, which is a real concern. And we need to consider, what is the alternative to that, because otherwise potentially that could result in them going back to their perpetrator. The other concern was that victims approaching after fleeing domestic abuse are finding that they are being offered accommodation in properties which are a considerable distance away. Obviously, we are aware that there is a housing crisis. It is difficult. There is no kind of available accommodation. It's very hard. However, when we're asking a vulnerable victim who has just fled, a serious violent incident, they've got their children with them, to then kind of leave everything that they know, leave their work, leave their families, their community, their children have to leave their schools. That's a huge thing to ask a victim of domestic abuse. And often they may have additional vulnerabilities in that they may have issues with their own physical or mental health, or they might have children who've got additional complex needs as well. So asking them to move a significant distance away, and we have had clients that have been asked to move, quite far. That again, isolating them is a real concern. Setting them up to fail potentially could result in them going back to their perpetrator. We would never advocate for a victim of domestic abuse to remain in their danger area, of course. However, I do think it's important that we do take those additional, sometimes complex needs into consideration when we're looking at where we're going to place those clients. Sometimes there's inconsistency around what clients are being advised, because when we're speaking to our clients and we're advising them around what potentially, because we have to manage their expectations, of course, so when we're talking to them about what potentially could happen if they do approach housing, and that potentially that they may not remain in the borough, there's a little bit of an inconsistency, because sometimes some of our clients have been placed in the borough. So there's a bit of confusion around, what is the policy around that, or what is the consideration around why are some victims allowed to remain in the borough but others are being told you've got to go to Luton or Peterborough, you've got to move that far away. So that's a bit of a concern, because we are obviously advising our clients, but we want to be advising them correctly and effectively, and manage those expectations, like I said. Another concern is that housing officers, clients are not always able to get hold of their housing officers. They don't always call clients to update them on what is happening with their housing situation. We don't really have any time frames about how, if somebody, for example, completes a duty to refer to housing, how quickly is that victim going to be contacted? So just today I was speaking to an IDVA. She completed the duty to refer on the 12th of July, and today the client is saying that she still hasn't heard from anybody. So it would be good to get some kind of clarity around, how, what those timeframes are, so we can make sure that we are advising our clients, you will be contacted by this time. Another concern is around the sanctuary scheme. Can we talk about sanctuary scheme? Yeah. So sanctuary scheme referral. So that's just to explain. The sanctuary scheme is when the property is assessed, to look at what additional measures can be put in place to make that property secure. Not all victims of domestic abuse are going to want to flee or leave their property. They want to remain where they are. So then we need to look at, okay, how can we keep that victim and their children as safe as possible in that property? And the sanctuary scheme is one of the options that we will consider. So again, there's not really a clarity around time frames. When we make a referral, clients don't always hear back from anybody around the sanctuary scheme. It would be good if perhaps, if we do make a referral, if housing then contact the client to say, okay, maybe an automated message or something, just to say, we've received your sanctuary scheme referral and we will be in contact with you, because then the client knows that referral has been picked up and that they should be expecting that call. Also, there's a concern around there's quite a high turnover of staff within the team, so it's difficult because we want to obviously advocate for our clients, but we don't always know who's working within that particular team. The staff change quite often. We're not always updated on who the new team members are going to be. Sometimes housing officers will leave, but victims are not told that housing officer has left. So that housing officer may have asked for certain documentation from that victim, who may then have sent it, but because that person has left and the victim hasn't been told, that's kind of just been left. So I think it's really important that we, just for the communication between housing and our team, for us to know these are the people that we need to be liaising with, but also for victims also to be kept updated, or if the housing officer has left, that the new housing officer, is appointed and they make contact with that client as soon as possible to make them aware that they've taken out over the case. Another concern was just around, so are victims able to turn up to housing without an appointment is another concern, because what we're finding is how the victims are going to the housing reception, and then they're being asked at the housing reception, have you got an appointment? And if the victim doesn't have an appointment, they're being turned away. We just need some clarity around, okay, so if a victim does turn up and they don't have an appointment, what is that person at the housing reception advising the client? Because what they need to be advising them, that you need to go to the main reception and speak to the security, because we've got a really good working relationship now with security. If a victim does turn up at security, they contact us straight away, and there's always a duty officer, duty worker within our team, and they will go down and they will speak to that victim and obviously work with that victim, and if it's a housing issue, they will help them do the duty to refer and then take them over to housing. So what I'm concerned about is if a victim does just go to the housing reception, are they just turned away because they haven't got an appointment, or are they advised to go to the security, because then at least then we can then pick that case up. The other concern was around interpreters. Are interpreters routinely used if a client doesn't speak English? I'm not sure, and it's really vital, obviously, because we need to have a real understanding about what that client's situation is. So it's really important that they're spoken to with a professional interpreter, and to never use a family member or their children. We don't know if that's a safe option, so it's really important that a professional interpreter is used, and I don't know if that's happening in all cases. And the other thing was around the housing reception. If a victim approaches having fled domestic abuse, potentially that victim is going to be in that housing reception for the whole day. So we're just wondering, how, does that meet the client's needs? Is there a water cooler in there? Is there stuff for the children to do? Is there any toys, any magazines? Because, that victim is going to be waiting there. We've had clients that have been in there the whole day waiting to hear back about what's going to happen. And they're really scared to leave, because if they leave, they're scared that the housing officer is going to come down, and they're going to miss their chance to speak to somebody. But there are good things as well. So, now that HDAS now is based here at the Civic Centre. We used to be based at the police station, but now that we're here at the Civic Centre, it makes our working relationship so much better with housing. We've worked really hard to build a really, really good, strong working relationship with our housing colleagues. We can just go down to the housing floor and speak to the housing officer if we have any concerns, share our concerns, discuss the risks, and we work really well with the housing officers at the moment. And I think that's really proactive. So it's a really, really positive working relationship.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything, Sultana?
Yeah, just to add on that is that it's important that there's consistency around the workers as well, because again, it's really difficult when we're supporting clients who are in crisis and we need consistent communication with housing officers, and we get bounce back emails, notification basically informing us that the person has left, and then we're left chasing up, trying to find out who the case has been allocated to, who it's been overseen by, and it's really important that consistency is there. Again, in the housing team, there's amazing housing officers who are trained in DA, and I think one point that I would like to raise is that part of my work was to basically reach out to different departments within the council to offer DA training, and I've been trying to do this for 6 months, and I've reached out to different managers in housing, and unfortunately I haven't had any sort of response back. And this is so important because we have, new employees coming in who need this piece of work, awareness around DA as well, and we're here to help. But unfortunately, we're not kind of being supported around that. So it's important that when trainings are being offered in-house, that that there's kind of a better approach from housing, and it's important. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing as well? I think it's really, and part of Sultana's training would be just to highlight the importance that victim's perception of risk of their own situation is incredibly important, because they are going through the domestic abuse. They understand the risks. They understand what their perpetrators are capable of doing. And it's really important for housing officers to understand that they may be that one person that victim has approached and opened up to and disclosed the abuse to. So, they must be kind of open, believing and listening to what that victim is telling them. They cannot kind of, and I'm not saying that they are, but what I'm saying is that you can't have that kind of disbelief or that kind of challenging of what that victim is disclosing. It's vital, because potentially the victim's probably been told by their perpetrator, no one's going to believe you, no one's going to help you in this country if they're not originally from here. You won't get the help and support. So if they then finally pluck up the courage to be able to come and speak, and then they're presented, with somebody who's not fully believing or understanding where they're coming from, then we're setting that victim up to fail and potentially sending them back to their perpetrator. So it's really important. Thank you.
Could you just turn your mic?
Sorry.
Sorry, thank you. Sonia Sultana, thank you very much for that presentation, and that feedback is invaluable. And listening to some of those points you raised, I can very much relate to those. I'm sure Councillor Davis can as well. We did a visit to the reception area, and the things you're raising are exactly the same things we mentioned as well. So that's reassuring in a way to know that the committee's on the right path, and it's in line with the concerns of yourself and others. Before I go to questions from members, I will invite Rachel to say a few words, and then we'll take questions combined, if that's okay. So Rachel, whenever you're ready.
Hello everybody. Firstly, let me apologise for my lateness. Nice to meet you all. I think I've met a couple of you previously on Teams meetings. My name's Rachel Bully and I'm a social prescriber for PCN Coal Union. I'm not sure if you know so much about what PCN is. So it's a collection of GP surgeries based to collect a network. So I'm Coal Union, so that represents West Drayton and Newsley area. We have many social prescribers all across the borough of Hillingdon, and they're all in sort of different PCNs. But the organisation that we actually work for is called Confederation Hillingdon, and actually their offices are just downstairs. So we're a CIC organisation, and it's all based around healthcare. Social prescriber is quite a new role, I would say, within the NHS. It's based more on sort of, as it says in the name, the social elements of a person. So NHS, of course, has been looking at healthcare for a very long time, but finally, at last, we're looking at patients as a whole, comprehensively. So we recognise that a patient's, their patient's health is also impacted by their social, practical and well-being needs, and that also needs to be looked at whilst supporting residents and patients. So as a social prescriber, what our role is that we get referrals from GPs or reception staff, or actually even residents, patients can refer into social prescribing themselves if they're unsure about any local services or if they've got any issues around any sort of social practical issues that they may have, like problems around. So say if they're socially isolated, if they've got issues with housing, if they're any sort of debt or finance issues, bereavement, cancer care. So it's a really vast sort of area that we work with, and it's really important for social prescribers to understand and realise all the sort of local support and community services that are based within Hillingdon, because we're very much about integrated care. Because I think in the past, and sometimes even still now, I think especially with housing, I would say, there tends to be some gaps, and then those patients fall through those gaps. Then as patients come back into primary care, and then sometimes when that prevention isn't caught in that moment, then they get sent to maybe secondary care. And we want to provide that sort of preventative level for our patients to get the support in primary care where it's needed, but also work with other local services, such as the local authorities, such as domestic abuse charities, such as Bell Farm, and really kind of get our residents' voices heard and get them to, get them aware of the services that they can really, really tap into to take care of their own health and well-being. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And can I just say, I'm so sorry, I just want to echo as well what Sonia and Sultana was saying. She raised many valuable points. I know we don't necessarily deal with domestic abuse, but I feel that, the points that you raised are many of the points that I'm like, yes, exactly. So I full-heartedly support what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
I invite questions from members, and we'll start with Councillor Gardner.
I was actually going to ask, have you got any comments about the failings of the housing department, Sonia, but you've given me all of them. I think what I find in my role is that some of the victims that turn up don't feel that they're believed, and they will immediately go back into themselves and go back to the perpetrator. And the thing that I would love to come and talk to the staff about the effects of domestic abuse. The bit that worries me is that I don't think the housing staff realise how long and how much strength it has taken for a victim to actually disclose and present themselves down there. And one knockback is enough. They will just leave then, the victim not be, as you say, the perpetrator will tell them they won't believe, nobody cares about, etc., etc. And it buys into what the perpetrator's been saying to them. I think some housing staff in the past, I'm not going to say today, they've been dismissive of people who presented as victims of domestic abuse. And when I'm dealing with them, you're dealing with them all the time, and you just think, why? I mean, it's very, very rare that somebody will come and say they're a victim of domestic abuse just to get rehoused. I think in the 30 years I've been doing it, maybe one, and that's still a bit, I'm still not too sure about that. But I think it's the lack of feeling that the housing staff have. And also, I've got this thing where I contact my DV victims all the time, just to see if they're okay, just to see if everything's all right. When the football was on, I was ringing them regularly because it opens up the triggers for them. People don't appear to understand the ongoing effect that it has. I mean, as I say, all joking aside, what happened to me was 35 years ago, but when I hear stories about people or I different things, it triggers things in me, and I go back and remember stuff. And that's post-traumatic stress, and that's going to happen to everybody. And they also need to know that as victims, that, yeah, you can get out of the house, we can do this, we can do that, but please, it doesn't stop there. It's still in there, you know. Thank you for pointing out the failings. Dan's done 2 pages of notes. Thank you.
Rachel, did you wish to comment on that?
Yes, please. Sorry. I just want to echo that in terms of, like you said, I feel that when we've approached housing, there's a serious lack of empathy and understanding of what patients are going through. I've had many patients sit in front of me fully desperate, pleading with me to help them get out of, their dire situation. And the message that we receive back from housing has always been extremely negative, especially when it comes to sort of overcrowding. It's like, well, actually, who asked you to have X amount of children or family, or for example, if it turns to refugees, you travelled this far, I'm sure you can travel further up the UK to be housed. And that kind of feedback and information that we get back from housing really is unsupportive, really doesn't help us, because then we're basically going to tell patients, how are we supposed to have that conversation with patients to say, actually, there's nothing that we can do to help you. Your housing officers are not answering us either. And we're just, I think, as social prescribers, we're really stuck in that middle in between from the patient and also housing officers who just don't seem to connect, I would say, with the humanistic side of patients. And it just seems more kind of like a tick box. But by saying that, like you've mentioned, I guess you brought up quite a few negatives. With my organisation, we have been speaking to the transformation team in the housing department, and we are coming up with ways to kind of bridge that gap between primary care and local housing authority. So we're looking at doing bite-sized workshops for primary care staff. We're looking at hopefully maybe having a new role within housing that, would be that link between patients and themselves, and also like Q&A sort of leaflets. So all the questions that we always get very, very sort of similar from patients, we've got that leaflet to say to the patient, okay, here are the answers. Because I think people are just so confused, like you said earlier as well. One person might get something, but the other one doesn't, and then it's just always such a mix of communications. And if we're confused, could you imagine people who are in a situation themselves, even to the point where we're told actually any mental health illness is not enough anymore. You could be really highly anxious, you could be going through panic, have severe levels of depression, but we've been told by housing that that's expected. You're expected to have those feelings while you're in that situation. And I just feel that's extremely it's unfair and it's not okay, to be frank. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, I know there wasn't a question to start. Would you like a supplementary, or so? Did you? Yes, Sonia, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say there are some housing officers where it is you do get that negativity, but I would say at the moment the domestic abuse team that we have here are really good, and actually there's one team member that every single member of the team praises continuously, and I won't name names, I'll speak to you later, Melissa, but you know, this particular housing officer, she goes above and beyond, and she's fantastic. So there are positive housing officers, and the domestic abuse team at the moment, I think they are working really well, and we're working really well with them. I think it's a training issue, which we really need to get in there and try and offer some training to housing. I think that's a really vital part at the moment.
Councillor Garner, do you have a supplementary?
One member of staff. That's really, really good.
That we work with.
Would you turn your microphone
Sorry.
on? Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got hundreds of questions, but I won't go that far. One thing that really, when we did our visit, it was quite concerning. So I take on board exactly what you say about housing reception. It's like being in a custody suite. So I completely get that. Who put into place that if they report to housing, they need to go to the security desk? Was that something that you guys put in, or was it just that's the process?
So it's just happened quite recently, where there's a security guard on the housing reception at the door.
Yeah.
So I don't know who put that security guard there.
No, what I'm trying to say. So you said that if someone presents to the housing reception who's a DV victim, they need to go to main reception.
So my point was, if a victim turns up and says they're fleeing domestic abuse at the housing reception and they don't have an appointment, what happens to them? Are they just turned away, or are they advised to go to the main reception to speak to security? I don't know what happens, and that's what I just needed clarity around.
Okay, come back to Helen.
Maybe Dan might be able to answer that shortly, but if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. If we can find that out as well, and what training security have got. If we're diverting people to security, I know we've had a conversation on this already, but that's quite concerning if someone potentially, male or female, going to someone who's quite big and bulky on security could trigger, as Councillor Gardner said.
Dan, I'll give you the opportunity to comment at the end, so if you continue taking your notes, that'll be fine. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman. Rachel, I'm interested in the integrated care once somebody's within housing. So a lot of homelessness is caused by drug abuse and alcohol abuse. So do we have many detox facilities and places? Sitting in court for many years, it was the hardest thing was to find anybody some treatment once we were sentencing them, to be honest. But so my question is really, what mental health care is there, and what detox for drugs and alcohol abuse do we have?
Thank you for your question. With social prescribing, and in terms of sort of Hillingdon, we have ARCH, and they're the main service that we GPs would refer to, or even patients themselves would do a self-referral to. But I know in terms of ARCH and their capacity is an issue as well. So I believe that they have a lot more patients than they actually have staff, or psychiatrists or mental health practitioners. But that's where we would normally sort of reach out to say, our patient's got an addiction, we need that support to be put in place. In terms of the mental health services, every PCN has a mental health practitioner, and that mental health practitioner would then triage patients that's been referred to them, and then either say, okay, we can get you support in primary care, or we can get you support in secondary care services. Also, that I'm aware that the transformation team under the Confederation, we're doing quite a big neighbourhood project around anxiety and depression. I know that's lower levels of mental health, but it needs to start somewhere, I would say. In terms of detox clinics, to be honest, I would not know. That would be something that Arch would sort of more manage, or specific clinical staff in that area. So thank you.
Councillor Lewis, would you like a follow-up question?
Well, just to you, Chairman, are you going to be seeing Arch then? Because, I mean, it's one of the main causations of homelessness is mental health issues, poverty, and...
It would depend on the remit of the review. The review is to look at the experience of the resident's journey through the actual housing service, but we can take it into consideration and look at the options and see if it's worth looking at. If not, we would certainly look at it at a later date.
My point is that we want to get people through the housing system and not fail them as they go through it. And unless we actually alleviate the poverty and give them the means to actually live an independent life, we can't. We've got to shuttle people through the system, presumably, because we don't have unlimited resources. So we have to try and break the cycle, I would have thought.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cool.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, ladies, for your presentation. Because from our casework, a lot of things have come back to us, exactly pointing out what you said, apathy in a big way, and the way they're just, dismissed. I think all of us have heard your concern around communication and inconsistency of approach. I was just wondering if you have any other concerns like resources, like staff turnover. You mentioned it's probably high turnover, and the housing probably is more concerned than at your end. But how are you in terms of resources? How are you placed, and what can the council do more to help you guys out? Thank you.
As in our service? So our service, like I said, we've got 5 IDVs and 3 floating support workers. So in that sense, we are quite strong. We only used to have 3 IDVs in the team, so and now we've got the floating support side as well. So actually, from what we were to what we are now, we are flourishing, I would say. Just to, in perspective, just to say, to give some context, in the last year, January last year to January this year, as a service, we received 1,005 new referrals into our service, and out of those, 814, which is 81%, were considered high risk. So we're dealing with, real high risk situations within the team. I think what would be amazing for our service and for our clients is if we had some kind of counselling service within our team, or accessible, because for a victim of domestic abuse, as you mentioned, Councillor Gardner, it doesn't just end when a perpetrator has been arrested or if they've gone to prison. This is a long-term, they're going to be dealing with this for a very long time. And counselling is one of the things that, really, they really need to be able to, try and get through to the other side. And counselling services are sparse. It's very difficult to find a service. They've got massive waiting lists, as you probably have seen. So so that's one of the things I think would be really beneficial to have access to. But I think in terms of our service, I think we're doing well.
Councillor Cole, would you like a supplementary?
Yeah, just in terms of how else do you think Dan can help you better? Like better cooperate, coordinate, communicate. What else do you expect from Dan or the rest of the council for that matter?
I think good communication is really key. We need to know who do we need to go to. if we need, so who is going to be within that domestic abuse team? Is it going to be a specific domestic abuse team, or is it going to be all housing officers are going to be dealing with domestic abuse? How is that going to look? Who should we be approaching? Can maybe have a single point of contact that we can, go to if we have any concerns or that we need to chase something up. Because a lot of the time that's what we're doing. We're chasing and we're trying to look at, who do we need to speak to, who's the housing officer, oh no, that person's left, so who do we need to go to now? So that would be really beneficial to have somebody that we can go directly to. I think it's just the communication is really vital. Is there anything else that you can...
I think ultimately, our main aim is to make sure that we're providing that support that the victim needs, and that is the main goal. And we've been working, as Sonia said, we've been working really closely to build a stronger partnership with all departments, and we've come a long way, Dan, from being at Uxbridge Police Station to here. And it takes a lot of work, and we've got a good relationship, and I think that even though we're different services, we are kind of together as one team, and at the end of the day all we want is a swift process, and just to make sure that we're supporting the victims and managing the risk, because that's what we do, that's all we would like.
I was going to say something, it's gone now. Sorry, it's gone. I was going to say something and it's gone. It'll come back to me.
Rachel.
Thank you. Also, I think it would be really interesting, because we understand that there are schemes available within the housing department, like a deposit scheme, but how do patients or residents access that? There's so many times where I've emailed housing officers, and it seems to be this sort of like gatekeeping situation, and they say, and we've had situations like, they will do a financial check, with the patient, but who does that? When will that be done? How does a patient get to the rent deposit scheme? And I feel all this is all sort of up in the sky, but nothing's really happening in practice. So we're being told it's there in theory, but we actually cannot support our patients to practically get that support. Also as well with the local housing living allowance. So it's a very vicious circle, I would say. So if a patient said you need to go to private renting, is there a team within the council or the housing department that will support those patients through that process? And if a patient then finds property in private renting, they need a deposit. But then to get that deposit, they need a tenancy agreement. But to get that tenancy agreement, you need a deposit first. And you can go to get your DHP, discretionary housing payment. But in order to get that, you need to show evidence that you've got So at the moment, it's such a vicious circle, and we just keep going, round and round, and then it sort of drops off for a moment, and then, it's. So I think in terms of communication and really understanding the process, I would say with social prescribing, we do get some referrals for women who are survivors of gender-based violence, but generally I would just say it was more sort of a generic population who are either homeless or street homeless, or they've just got their right to remain in the UK, and then they're like asked to leave their hotel, and then they're homeless, or there's serious issues of overcrowding as well. So even to know the whole sort of process, and like you said, who to go to, would be really beneficial for everybody. Thank you.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for my voice, it would be recalled. I want to say thank you to you all for coming this evening. It's much appreciated, and especially Rachel. We've been on Teams calls. It was last December, I think it was. So thank you for coming. One of the things that when we had that call, and one of the reasons I asked for social prescriber presence was we were looking at something we're going to come on to later on in the agenda this evening. The base needs of residents before they can sort of look at anything else. The housing aspect is just primary for residents. council review is looking at what service is currently being offered and how it can be improved. So it's to understand from your point of view what the experience is of residents and the impact on their mental health, etc. And also from our colleagues with IDFA, looking for recommendations as what you think the council, where it can improve. So we've heard about failings, but we've also heard from other witnesses in previous where they think the things that can be done. So like Councillor Davis and Bridges, Councillor Gardner and I have also attended the housing reception and also the contact centre, and we observed there as well things that have been described, such as how stark this housing reception is. As has been referenced earlier about provision for children. There's also aspects of safety for council staff down there as well. There's nothing on the walls. It's just completely barren of anything informative for people to read, to educate themselves on what's going on. But also the gatekeeping, something we've heard this evening as well, where the contact centre are acting on behalf of the housing department. So I've seen that and heard that with my own eyes and ears that is going on. So I'm giving testimony myself to the committee on that basis. But I'd like to hear from you, Rachel, on the mental health issue that the service is currently providing to residents, and then also to hear from all of you about recommendations you think that would be advantageous to the council, and the recommendations that we make as a committee to the cabinet could be taken on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farley. I would say with the residents that I've spoken to, and I'm pretty sure across the whole team of social prescribers, the impact of the housing crisis and housing issues on patients' mental health is huge. It's enormous. This is an area, to be honest, that we do tend to sort of struggle with also, because if a patient's in a certain desperate situation, all they can think about in that moment is how they can get out of that situation, if it's terrible housing situation. So we do offer them like talking therapies or speaking to our mental health practitioner, but in those times they're not interested within that, because they're just kind of like, I need my housing sorted first and foremost. And what's the point of me, trying to find coping strategies? What's the point of me trying to find, or speaking to someone about it, because that doesn't change my situation. And so again, we're always quite sort of trying to be supportive as possible, but then we do get that resistance to a certain extent from patients that don't really want to access mental health services because they believe their situation is situational, and if their housing wasn't a problem, then they wouldn't be experiencing such low mental health issues. And I think also there is that stigma that people, or some people would think that, oh, I'm just going to say that I have anxiety, or I'm just going to say that I have PTSD, and patients are really, really suffering. And I think sometimes, it's not really taken into full consideration the impact it's having on their physical health as well. We're having patients, who are on more medication, I would say, to help them with surviving, I would say, through this dire situation that they're in. And also as well, it's quite difficult because there is that gap sometimes between primary mental health services, like talking therapies, and you've got secondary mental health services. So sometimes we have a patient that's in the middle, and so primary care is saying, oh no, they're too high in needs for us. Secondary care is saying, oh, actually, they're too low in needs. And what do we do then? And I know, the borough's got great services and groups for, positive mental health, like gardening groups and creative groups. But again, patients don't want to really engage in that. Their focus, because they live it day in and day out, is getting their housing situation fixed. And we're being told, and we're having to tell patients, this isn't a fast situation. This could be going on for 15 years. So it's a really challenging situation to hold patients within. Thank you. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Councillor Varley?
If I may, thank you, Chair. I'll also look into some recommendations as well from your point of view as to what the service could be doing better, or what you think, how you could be improved.
Thank you. I think slowly but surely things are happening, especially because with our transformation team, we are working with the Housing Department's transformation team. So a lady called Fola, I can't remember her surname, and Reginald. And so we are looking at ways that we can sort of integrate together and have maybe somebody, I think you said like the single point of contact, that we can then reach out to, who will then sort of provide that patient support or give us the information that we need to relate to our patients. So it's not just, I think it's a two-way street, that we're supporting housing officers in the same way housing officers are supporting us. So it's not us just kind of demanding or wanting or needing. We're saying, actually, we can help you as well, because the patients come to us first, and we can take off actually a lot of that pressure if we have the understanding and we know the process. So I think, having a single person of contact would be fantastic. Also, what we're doing at the moment, we've got road shows. I don't know if you're aware. So the Confederation hosts road shows for each PCN. And so I think on the 31st of August, we're having one based in the West Drayton Community Centre. And we've invited a member from there, from the housing team, to hopefully deliver a workshop just to kind of informally educate residents about what housing is at the moment and what the expectations are. Because I feel that sometimes expectations are unrealistic, and however many times you try and sort of ground the patient, it doesn't necessarily hold any weight, because they may feel you're lying to them or you're gatekeeping something. So I think education within the community around housing and the process is extremely important. And it's not just about leaflets or websites. It's maybe having a support, someone that you can actually go to in a council and saying, I haven't heard from my officer, what do I do now? Because I don't think we need any more sort of housing jargon or sort of legal jargon to confuse patients even more. I think they just need that one person that they can feel that they can go to, or a team of people that you can go to really get that support and that understanding and just feel really heard and validated, I would say. Because they feel that they're abandoned, to be honest. So many times I've had patients saying, we're forgotten about, we're abandoned, nobody cares.
Thank you. Councillor Gohill?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the work you do. Part of our review is to scrutinise the service delivery and review its effectiveness, but I think in order to effectively do that, we need to put it into context. So homelessness isn't something just affects Hillingdon, it's a problem all across London. I was wondering if you had any knowledge of how your counterparts in other boroughs do, and if they experience the same problems as you, or better or worse, or if there's any best practice that we can pick up on as a borough.
No, the answer. So probably they do. I think we have had actually some feedback from other IDVAs in other areas that it is, and also the IDVAs within the team have come from different domestic abuse services in different areas. And actually, Polly Sultana, you can answer this because you've come from
different areas.
Domestic abuse services.
I moved around a lot. My last borough was Barnet. To be honest, all the housing departments have issues, and it's the same thing, how basically they approach domestic abuse victims and how do they support them with empathy, taking everything into consideration and not scrutinising them, because there is a lot of gatekeeping, and that's just the honest truth. As IDVA's frontline workers, we've had cases where we've been asked to provide with evidence, as in, like, if the client has presented saying that she fled emotional, verbal abuse, controlling behaviour. Again, they've been asked, have they done a report to the police, what to explain, is there evidence? And it's not best practice, because again you're questioning a victim who has approached. But there's many barriers. I've got colleagues who've come from, I believe, Danielle was from Hounslow, right? Hounslow.
Yeah.
They have similar issues than us. When we're actually signposting our clients to different boroughs as well as victims of domestic abuse, they can approach any other borough for emergency accommodation. Their process is similar as well.
Yeah.
Honestly, and there's again lack of communication, consistency, finding it really difficult to, signpost them, making sure that they've accessed support. We're in-house here, so it's easier for us to actually, when our clients do present, or if we have an urgent case and we're informed by security, the duty worker would actually take the time out and go down there, get the information, and we'll link them in. We'll do the duty to refer. So it's a positive thing. However, we can't manage that when we're signposting clients saying that you can approach Ealing, Brent, which is safe, and as a victim of domestic abuse, you have every right to access emergency accommodation, because we don't know what's going to happen. So, to be honest, everyone's got their issues, and it's just an ongoing, I think.
I think also, just to add, there's also issues with refuge as well. So many refuges have closed. It used to be quite easy to get a victim into a refuge. You'd just call and then they'd accept them. But now the space is not available until a few days later. They need it now. They're in an emergency situation right now. They have to do so many different checks now. It is really difficult for victims to access safe accommodation. So I think it is across the board.
Priscilla, do you wish to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back to Councillor Gohill just to say that from the public health team, if it's required to look at profiles of homelessness against comparator sites via other boroughs, we'd be happy to provide that to this committee. So the OHED, which is the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities, holds that data. It gets given to each borough and particularly into public health. And I would be able to access that either directly for you or certainly get colleagues to help you see where we are in relation to either West London or London as a whole.
Thank you. That's very
Councillor Gohill, your supplementary.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And first of all, can I just say I'd really love to see that, because I don't think we can effectively improve ourselves without knowing where we stand. So if we could do that, maybe to the committee, maybe through Liz, if that's possible. That would be really great. My second question is around support from other bodies, and in particular, do you get support from other bodies like the GLA? Because I know it's one of their main driving factors to reduce homelessness in London. And I was just wondering how much support you currently get, and if you know it's one of their main drivers or things that you ask them for. Equally, are you asking them for extra support, because there's some things they might be able to do to help you as well?
So our service, we haven't liaised, we haven't asked for additional support. I don't know if that's something.
I'm pretty sure it is.
I'm sure Dan can clarify in his wrapping up comments. Did you wish to say anything further? No? Okay. Before I go on to the further questions, we're just coming up to about an hour now into this item. We do have other items to go through, but I do want to allow as many questions as possible. So if we can now keep the questions and answers as brief as possible to ensure we get the maximum amount of questions in. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned about relocating some of your clients that are out of borough. So if you relocated someone from Hillingdon, a DB victim, etc., and they ended up in Peterborough, do they still stay with you, or do they move to that local authority?
So they wouldn't stay with our service. We would refer them to the domestic abuse service in the area that they've moved to. If there's children and they're open to children's social care, they would do a transfer to their new area.
So you might not know this, but I'm going to chuck it out there anyway. How many residents have you moved out of borough that have come back because they've got attached to you guys and feel safe with you and haven't got on with another authority or another service that they've been moved to. Does that happen? Or
Yes. So we have had clients return, and maybe not because they're attached to our service, but because they want to come back to their area. This is what they know. This is where they have their family and their support networks. That is a real concern of mine, actually, because I don't know if you're aware of MAWAC at the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference. So if it's a high-risk case, it should be referred to the MAWAC. So if in Hillingdon a case has been to MAWAC and the victim moves out of borough, there should be a MAWAC to MAWAC transfer to their new area, so that everybody in that area is aware that that victim and that the children have moved there. What should happen is if they move back, there should be another MAWAC to MAWAC into Hillingdon, and that doesn't always happen, and that's a real concern because that victim potentially is back in Hillingdon and we don't know. So that is a real gap.
And back on our homeless figures as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. No further questions, Chairman.
Councillor Lewis?
I think it's been answered, Chairman. So I'll pass.
Councillor Gardner?
Bearing in mind the financial situation of most councils, in an ideal world, I would like an in-house counselling service, simply because not only for the victims but also for the staff, because day in, day out, I think that's where the sympathy goes. If you hear the same story over and over again, it's a bit like just a number and a name. I mean, as I say, if I win the lottery, I'll get you an in-house but it's not only for yourselves, but not only for the victims or those in crisis, but also for the staff, because hearing things over and over again, I mean, all joking aside, I actually had counselling because I needed it, because my head was going to explode. But it takes a very, very long time, or you have to do what I do, is pay for it. Okay?
Can I just come back on that? And I absolutely agree with you, Councillor Gardner. So when the IDVAs came in from other services, they were really shocked that we don't get clinical supervision within the team. I mean, the IDVAs within the team are listening to harrowing accounts of serious violence towards not only clients but children as well. And this is something that we're listening to all the time. And to not receive clinical supervision for the team members to be able to speak to somebody independent, to be able to have that, someone to offload to discuss what they've gone through, what they've listened to, is vital. And it was asked about, what would we like from the council. That is something that we really feel would be incredibly important for the team, and we've never had it. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got no other questions from members, so at this point I'd invite Dan to wrap up and then go to yourselves if you wish to make any closing statements before we move on to the next item. Dan?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for your contribution this evening. I mean, it is, I suppose, just a sort of bit of context. We know it's a tough environment. We're seeing somewhere in the region of 120 to 140 housing needs approaches every single week, and that's up by about 28% since 2019, pre-pandemic, and that's a pattern right across London, compounded by mortgage interest rates rising, people struggling to be able to access buying property themselves. Rents are going up typically 8 to 10% a year, and landlords, it's become a less favourable investment opportunity now with less tax breaks, etc. So more and more landlords are exiting or choosing different ways to invest their money. So it's become a kind of collision of a whole manner of different things, which has made the housing market, affordable housing market, and accessing affordable housing incredibly challenging. That said, the Cabinet have been incredibly supportive. They've invested huge sums of money, giving good commitments, so 300 extra properties to acquire this year. We've got a whole range of partnerships as well to increase housing supply through working with housing associations. We'll be well on an additional 500 properties this year compared to last year. We were looking this week at some figures. I mean, the changes we made over the last year has meant that we reduced the number of placements through prevention and negotiation with landlords and increasing supply, a number of placements into temporary accommodation last year by 10% compared to the previous year. So, and I know that sounds like, well, okay, but the vision is we've got to prevent homelessness because we need to give families with children, stable housing and secure housing, because it shows that's, for families, they get the best outcomes. Children don't need to be moving schools, they don't feel unsettled and so on. And with that in mind, the work we are doing is starting to show some progress now. We've seen a drop by about 7% in the number of households who are living in temporary accommodation, the highest cost temporary accommodation since mid-April till now. That's dropped. We have no families in commercial hotels now, which, and there are other boroughs in London who have 400 families in hotels. And we've also got no families with children living in shared accommodation for more than 6 weeks, which is one of our key indicators. And at the end of December, we had about 23. So we are making progress, and whilst it is incredibly challenging, and I'm not complacent because there's still a lot to do. Coming back to some of the points that were raised, and you are right about consistency, and it's something Melissa and I have picked up on. So we are looking at how we can strengthen the training. We've got a training program for staff, and empathy. And I do, and it is tough. And I was on the floor this week speaking to some housing officers, and we're getting referrals from other boroughs, and we're trying to resolve what's coming through the door. There was 2 reciprocal domestic abuse referrals this week. And the challenge is we have to go and ask some of those difficult questions of the referrer, which sometimes can be a housing association or another borough, because we have to demonstrate eligibility. But it is how you ask those questions, and I fully accept that. And you do need to understand the situation, and also understand sometimes when you ask the question and what you ask for, and can you do that through a third party who may be able to have that relationship. In respect of domestic abuse, we do have a model at the moment where every officer has some cases, which could include referrals for those who are victims of domestic abuse. And we used to previously have a model where we had dedicated officers, and I want to put that back in, because you're right, you build the expertise, you build the empathy, but you also know how to ask questions, and thank you for your offer of training. We will take that up, actually. So it is something that, in fact, this week I was talking to the management team about that. We need to get that back quickly. And champions, I'd call them, but champions for other services like hospital discharge is where we've had champions previously. That's worked really well. So there is a model where we want to have some specialisms, and that you have that relationship and that single point of contact, albeit it might be through 2 people, but you know who to go to, and you know you're going to get a consistent response. Broader, I want to put in place we put back in about September time a triage function. We just didn't have that in place. And actually this week we were talking about how we can strengthen that further so that we have some dedicated, really strong, this is about having the expertise to ask the challenging questions, but in a good way. And sometimes we have to be really challenging with landlords to say, we don't want you to evict, let's have a conversation about how we can prevent that. And we are starting to see some success with that model, which is reflected in the reducing number of placements in accommodation. But equally, we need to increase the supply of private rented sector accommodation as well, and having those relationships with private landlords, having trust with landlords that when things sometimes do go wrong, we also step in and fix them. We don't just abandon the landlord with. So we are, that point about relationships is really key, both with providers as well as referrers. I recognise personally the pressure on staff and that they are in a really difficult environment because it sounds kind of completely obvious, but if we had a plentiful supply of housing, we wouldn't have a homelessness situation. I know it's stating the obvious, but we have housing to prevent homelessness, but also housing to move people on. So getting that supply has been an absolute priority of mine, and hence the business case to Cabinet to increase supply, and the business cases and the relationships with private sector landlords is really important. But we know that it's particularly tough. We've put in place, and it's draft. We've asked staff for their comments, a supervision policy. We've strengthened welfare arrangements and the management. And every week now we're having case conversations with staff about how you're getting on. What cases can you move on and close. So teams have got targets to close and move on cases. And when I say close, it means we've made a decision on a case. And then we can confirm to our residents that you've got a decision, you've got your homeless decision. This now means this. One of the areas we have been looking at is how we can strengthen the communication. Our letters have to be a bit legalistic, because we do get, unfortunately, a lot of legal challenge from representatives, particularly where the outcome isn't perhaps what the resident wants. But what we're now looking at is, and putting in place, is how can we put on top of all of that a really easy, not meaning to be patronised, but an easy everyday explanation. And that's then explained by the housing officers. That is part of the kind of customer care and communication that we can strengthen. And one final point, Councillor Davis, appointment process. No, we haven't got this quite right yet, and I know we've spoken about this, and it's something that actually I'm working with the corporate management team on, and Tony and co to make some further changes. We've had some incidents in housing needs reception prior to having an appointment process, and I've had to put the safety of staff first. And so hence you're absolutely right, we've got protection in there, etc. So we do run now an appointments-based system, and it was actually, in a flip side, it actually helps to provide a better customer experience, because we had anyone turning up and just waiting all day, which wasn't ideal either, particularly with larger families and young children. That's not ideal, and I don't want that. And so we run an appointments-based process. But even if someone turns up on the day, and obviously we triage that on the day, we do offer and can offer appointments-based process. But in order to kind of present the kind of congestion in housing needs reception, we do ask them to go to the corporate or main reception in order to book that appointment. But I'm not pretending that's right. We need to get that right, and we've got more work to do in that. And we are doing some work with the corporate management team to improve that, because it isn't just housing staff. It's actually any resident who comes in who wants to try and get access to their officer or ask for advice. They tend to go to main reception, and it's an area we are looking to improve. Sorry, final point, actually, I've kind of skipped over it, but we've included in the pack kind of the priority 8 work streams that we've got, which includes wider issues about housing supply, or wider priorities around housing supply, as well as customer care and customer journey and customer experience as part of that. I welcome any final questions.
Thank you, Dan. Rachel, Sonia, Sultana, is there anything you'd like to say before we go on to our next item?
I was just going to, the final thing I was going to say was, I'm a little bit concerned because I don't know what the domestic abuse presentation numbers are to housing, but we get very few referrals with our team from housing. So I'm not sure. It could be that the victim has moved out of borough, which is fine, but if they move out of borough, is that housing officer referring them to a domestic abuse service in the borough that they've gone to? And is that housing officer doing a referral to children's social care if there's children? So that's a concern for me, because I would expect a lot more referrals coming to us from housing if a victim is remaining in the borough, and we're not seeing that. I don't think there was anything else you wanted to add. I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your attendance this evening. It's been a very valuable experience for us on the committee. Thank you for the work that you do. We're now going to move on to our next item, so you're welcome to leave if you wish to do so. Okay. We'll take a moment for you to leave, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item 6 is the review of homelessness and the customer journey, and an update from the council officers on improvement activity, pages 23 to 42. It is well and truly the Dan show this evening, so we'll start. You mean to go on, Dan? Over to you.
I mean, I won't go into too much detail about the sort of key areas, but but we've got here is effectively our improvement plan to address a whole range of different issues that we are seeing in the homelessness and sort of customer journey. So it ranges from, and I won't read every single one out, but strategies and policies, workforce planning. I think that's really important for us, having more entry level sort of roles at the moment, and so that we actually, I want to get more. Well, I want a permanent workforce throughout, because there are just too many agency staff. It's an incredibly challenging area to recruit and retain in. But like many other services across the council, having a ladder, and I've heard a lot of this recently, is recruiting people with the right mindset and then training them to have a career in local government. We've got customer journey, customer care and management. I've mentioned supervision as well. That for me is really important. So it isn't just about checking that the officers are doing what they're doing, but giving them the support and giving them the opportunity to talk about any concerns and checking in on their welfare, because hearing some of the experiences from witnesses this evening, some of the casework is traumatic, and I need to know that the staff have the support that they need. One area that I did touch on is our housing commissioning plan, and we are looking to, as I said earlier, looking to increase the properties we've acquired, as well as make best use of the existing housing stock that we've got. So there's a whole range of different initiatives, which includes encouraging under-occupiers, council tenants under-occupiers, and housing association tenants who are under-occupying to downsize, encouraging the better use of the stock that we've got, acquiring more properties, and making best use of the private rented sector as well. So we've set ourselves some stretching but achievable targets to achieve that. I mean, the final area that I'm really looking to develop is really understanding the housing market locally and the pressures that we've got, because I follow the view that if we understand it, then we can predict it and then we can manage it. And what I mean by that is knowing, for example, down to the level of which private sector landlords are evicting and why, getting that relationship with them to try to prevent that, so that they come to us with a conversation rather than here's my possession notice and I've made my mind up. Because at that stage it's often quite hard to pull back. But I also want to understand as well, and we've got some really good information about the cost of temporary accommodation, where people are placed, how long they've been there, and prioritising where we need to secure and commission new properties to help people move on or even prevent, so that I can say confidently we will have, next year and the year after, we're likely to have this level of demand, and this is the plan to try and fix it. So we're not just reacting in year all the time. We're building a plan and an investment plan and practice changes that build a really positive pipeline of supply for housing. The final point is is actually strengthening the working relationships. I mean, within the council and other services like children's services and adult social care. In the main, we have some good working relationships and some great examples where teams have worked together to prevent homelessness, or even encourage sometimes families to take up an offer of accommodations, because not expectations can vary. Sometimes they can be very high, and we've got to explain and encourage families to say, look, this is going to be the very best offer that we can make at this point in time, and otherwise you may have to continue to stay in unsatisfactory housing whilst another offer or another opportunity comes along. Our biggest challenge is responding to emergency accommodation needs, and because sometimes it's just what we can find on the day to meet that need. And so hence trying to prevent or avoid on-the-day presentations can be critical. But I won't go through everything in detail. You've got the slide deck in there that Melissa's prepared, and very happy to take further questions on that now.
Thank you, Dan. Open this to questions from members. We'll start with Councillor Gohill, please.
Thank you, Chair. In the past, since we started this review, and we've had witness sessions, quite a lot of them, actually every single witness session we've had has alluded to some staff that we have here within the housing department who are not, the word that they use is empathy, are not empathetic enough. is there being active action taken to ask these members of staff who they're talking to and singling out these members of staff to improve how they communicate? Because, you know, you said it yourself, these questions have to be asked, but the way that we ask them is important. Do we know who isn't asking them right? And is there a clear plan? Is there a clear plan to address how these questions are asked by specific members of staff? Because we know it's not everyone. We know it's just a couple.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, it only takes, you know, one or two members of staff who perhaps is not not as empathetic as they should be, and who perhaps don't demonstrate the level of customer care I would expect every resident to receive. And it's an area that we've strengthened. So we've strengthened the communications with staff about expectations. Managers are also shadowing some members of staff, joining them, say, in conversations with residents. And I, again, following the work that councillors have done through this committee, I've also listening to calls, and am regularly now will be attending and listening to contact centre calls, because we have to work together as one team, and I think we have to recognise as well that residents want solutions to what sometimes can be a very uncomfortable or dire situation. And whilst we don't always readily have solutions, we can and should be empathetic, but also clear about what we can do and can't do. So yes, absolutely, we are picking up on individuals. So I know that there was one individual that was less than helpful, I think it's probably fair to say, and that's been dealt with. So training and conversations have been had.
If I could just make a comment rather than a question, and absolutely agree with everything you said, but I think it would be really, we're doing this review until next April, next May. It would be really great for us as a committee if we could hear a tangible change happening over the next couple of months. So, you know, say we pick this up in our February meeting, and we see, you know, people saying, well, actually, it used to be quite bad, but now it's actually getting better, or we're having more of a positive response now than we were a year ago. That would really help us actually shape and make some genuine change, which is the purpose of this committee. So yeah, that would, if we could add a bit of a KPI there, that would be really useful. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you for your comment. I'm glad to know that person's being dealt with, because that was horrendous that day. My question is, what percentage of properties are we set to lose? So we're bringing on 300 properties this year, which is great, but part of the right to buy, when it gets to 7 years, residents can buy their properties. Are we expecting to lose any out of our estate? Because if we bring on 300 and lose 50, are we tracking that? Have we...
Absolutely, and that number of 50 is spot on. Actually, we lose through right to buy about 50 a year. So you must be a betting man. But it's I mean, and it fluctuates, doesn't it, in terms of the market and the kind of economic conditions. But typically, it's about 50 a year, and as you would expect, many are family-sized properties. We are targeting family-sized properties, but also as well we are looking at properties which we know will be the sorts of properties that downsizers would want, because in everyday speak, if you can buy a one bed, which typically will be cheaper than a family sized property, and it's the right property, where you can release in a chain 1, 2 or even more family sized properties through a sequence of downsizes and sort of moves. So yeah, so we track that every single year, and the programme currently is outpacing that loss every year.
Any supplementary?
Yes. So part of your ongoing training, I had a case recently where a resident, which you actually assisted with, where they had to present themselves to a civic centre because the out-of-hours team hadn't had the correct homeless prevention training. Are we looking at retraining them? Because I know at the question was raised, who's the out-of-hours officer? Who did they need to contact? Eventually, when the resident of mine presented himself to the security desk, they did actually get dealt with. But that took 4 hours of stress to the resident. What training are we offering our out-of-hours team?
So in the main, our out-of-hours officers are actually very experienced. So I think, so for example, one of our out-of-hours officers actually runs the triage service, and she's got decades of experience, so it's very experienced. So I think, it's going to sound almost like a defensive point, and it's not, but I think that was a particular sort of issue at point. However, that said, again, this week, I've been reviewing with the management team what we actually need to do to strengthen the out-of-hours position. And we are looking at building actually a more resilient out-of-hours service, so that we have more than if it requires it, because sometimes we do get quite peaks, depending on what's going on in the world. We can get some evenings or overnight, some weekends, peaks in out-of-hours referrals, and we need a backup officer as well. But in the main, they tend to be handpicked for their experience and knowledge, and know what the referral processes are and thresholds are into social care for children, social care for adults, and hospital. So they're usually quite rounded. So I think it was just an unfortunate blip, actually. But generally speaking, it's something we keep a very close eye on. We track everything, all the referrals overnight and over the weekends. And in the main, they're very good at, because they have to triage, they have to assess the risk, and they have to make a judgment on using council resources to book in or not book in, and negotiate sometimes if there is an alternative temporary emergency or temporary accommodation arrangement. And so it can range from a whole range of different issues that present, so you do need good mediation skills as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Cool.
Thank you, Chair. Dan, I'm just, when it comes to reducing the number of homeless families in high-cost temporary accommodation, does it also include the people who are asylum seekers and who have become homeless and evicted out of the hotels? Because I think they are in a unique situation, not having the papers that are needed for them to go on, find a home. Because through some of my casework, my understanding was that they were shunted here and there. Someone asked one of the families to try look for someone who will host them, and they said come back in 15 days time, and then they shared people's homes and sofas and lived, and after 15 days they said if you could live through that 15 days you could possibly find another way of living like that, which I thought wasn't the way to deal with it. So when we say, do we also understand how these asylum seekers are homeless, not only because of the circumstances, but the fact that they are not getting the kind of support, either due to language or the other constraints?
Thank you for the question. Now, in Hillingdon, we do have a high number of asylum seekers placed by the Home Office, and we've discussed this in the corporate management team, and I am the corporate management team rep, and I am also the chair for a number of London-wide sort of local government groups. And so I've got quite a strong voice on this in London, and work very closely with Home Office. So just this week, for example, there were 2 meetings London-wide that I attended. So under homeless legislation, we have 56 days to try to find solutions, but all we're given is 28 days for those who leave the hotel. Who leave hotels or other accommodation the Home Office has organised. So we're lobbying very hard to say, look, we need more time, because for those who we do have a duty to provide assistance, it's not enough time, and therefore we end up having to place into whatever accommodation, quite frankly, we can find within that timescale. So and that may not always, whilst it would be suitable, it doesn't always necessarily meet the preferences of those who are presenting. What I would say as well is that those who are placed by the Home Office, they tend to be the vast majority single adults, and they don't attract priority need if there's no vulnerability. And so therefore what they do have access to is welfare benefits and a room rate which allows them to access, typically, depending on age, shared accommodation. And so we can and do offer advice, and that's our duty, and therefore we can offer them details around how to secure their own accommodation, or which agencies to go to as well. But they're not an ongoing case after a period of time. For those that are eligible for assistance, which tends to be those that have children, then we do make arrangements for accommodation, whether it's temporary accommodation or even typically private sector accommodation. What I would like to assure committee with as well is that we are being very proactive in this space, because otherwise we'll get very on the day presentations, and so we have a dedicated set of officers who are funded by grant, who actually work with the Home Office staff based in those hotels to track who's coming through when, and to be working on solutions, and also trying to in a very constructive way manage expectations, because some expectations, not all, are that the council will provide accommodation and we've got a plentiful supply, and actually just quite simply we haven't. So we start to work with those who are due to leave the hotels at a much earlier stage, and to try to help them and to find accommodation so that they don't have a homeless situation at the point they leave. They then transition straight into accommodation. And I mean, one of the points we have made as well is that local authorities do need more funding to provide that level of support to enable resettlement. There is no funding available, and I think that's a really important point that we've seen the motions agreed at council last week making that point. One of the elements of the motion was that we do need fair levels of funding, and not just us but all councils who are supporting asylum seekers.
Councillor Court, would you like to say anything further?
Thank you, Chair. And you said we are buying new houses, new stocks. Probably we are going to continue with this trend. Do you in any way then see a duration to temporary accommodation coming down while as we buy more houses, say 300 or 500 each year? Do you in near future or in a year or a couple of years time, do you predict that the temporary accommodation would be temporary to a certain duration? Now it could be years and years. Do you see that happening anytime? Thank you.
I mean, it's incredibly challenging. What I would say is that increasing the supply of private rented sector accommodation, increasing the supply of more social rented, affordable housing, and stronger prevention and mediation negotiation. So, for example, if a private sector landlord says they wish to evict their tenant, we would obviously want to understand why, but we do step in if there's rent arrears or the rent's going up and the tenant can't afford it. We do step in on occasions, negotiate, and will pay for the gap between the market rent and the benefit level for that tenant to have another 2-year tenancy. So there's lots of things, and all of those cumulatively do help to reduce overall the number of households living in temporary accommodation. That's our mission, absolutely. But how long sometimes families stay is very hard to say, because there are so many individual circumstances. But our mission absolutely is to reduce homelessness in the first place and to move on as quickly as possible from temporary accommodation.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Couple of queries on the workforce planning. What are outboard functions?
So outbound functions is, I mean, one of the things that we are keen to establish is a stronger sort of visiting function and engagement with residents. So training up staff to undertake visits and to ask those, as we spoke about earlier, those questions in a very sensitive, empathetic way, I think is key. But it's also about, in terms of workforce planning, it's actually about ensuring that staff are being supported at all stages, and that strong supervision, and also that staff feel that as well they have manageable caseloads. There's been a lot of work, done in particularly social care, that if you give staff manageable caseloads as well and support them manageable caseloads, that actually will retain staff for longer, and they actually will often stay for longer, the good staff, and not move to another borough.
Councillor Gardner.
When you have these staff, do you actually are they related to the communities? Because we've got lots of different communities in the borough, and I'm just trying to think of all the different languages that people speak, and are you going to take that into consideration in different areas? Yeah.
Absolutely. So in terms of our workforce plan, we do aspire to have a workforce that is a balance of obviously skills, experience, but also representing the community, and that certainly through the conversations we've been and actually practice in a number of areas, very successful practice, is to recruit staff from certain communities. We are actually quite diverse in a number of our housing teams and social care teams particularly, and so yeah, we've got a lot of practice to draw on, absolutely.
Councillor Lewis?
It was just picking up on the lack of empathy. I mean, in truth, it's a really difficult job, asking difficult questions, and some people will be more offended or less offended by those questions. So I think it has, and you've said almost that it's a dehumanising process, seeing it day after day and seeing similar terrible situations. But I'm just speaking up for the officers in a way. I think it has to be, if they need retraining, that's I totally understand, but it has to be evidence-based. And so do you record all the conversations and so that managers can play them back? And
we don't record all conversations, but what we've seen work well is where managers do join, and really just as part of the sort of support as well, particularly if you know an officer's going to have perhaps a trickier conversation or a more challenging conversation with a resident, or it may not be received well, then sometimes managers will attend and support the staff, or even coach them sometimes before about, well, let's talk about. So one of the areas we have some really, really experienced housing officers who've probably seen every single type of presentation, and so we do buddy up some housing officers who may be less experienced with the more experienced as well, so that they can talk through sort of scenarios and questions that may come up, and this is perhaps how you can handle this situation. But yeah, I suppose it's those staff who we are aware need extra help, for whom there might have been complaints or concerns, or something's come to our attention, then we do look to support those staff through training, questions, conversations, shadowing if that's necessary.
Okay. Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. Things I wanted to ask have been asked generally, but I would first of all concur with Councillor Gohill on seeing some tangible results, if we can call them tangible, but seeing results, because the concern I have with this, lots of good stuff in here, but what I'm not sure about is what already is in place, what is the plan. The language, as has been hinted by Councillor Gardner, is a bit sort of management speakish in some respects. I apologise if I don't mean to cause offence by that, but that's how reading it. I mean, I didn't understand that myself. I've read it several times and it wasn't clear. But what I would like to know is how this is sort of translating into tangible things, because if this started last year, and we are hearing from witnesses pretty much the same themes coming across, I'm not sure where we are with this plan, if it's partly, there's some things already in place, some are not, and if they are in place, why are we still hearing testimony that's been given by witnesses? So that's part of it. And also, you touched upon it as well, and I'm glad you clarified it, because when on page 32 with the supervision section, what isn't overtly clear on this is the support for staff, and Councillor Lewis has raised this as well, and it for me, and we've heard this from witness testimony as well, the support for staff, we've heard it tonight, ensuring that they are able to, I think one of the witness testimonies was about having a breakout so they could go and do something else in their roles, rather than being exposed to hearing harrowing stories hour after hour, week after week, and so I would like to see something in here that's more clear about the support staff, because you've got one-to-ones, but we have one-to-ones in our day jobs as well, which are just sort of how you catch up. I'd like to see something which is a bit more, if possible, specific to staff welfare, that it encourages them to remain with the council and to carry out that dedicated and valuable work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't believe there's any further questions, so I'm going to wrap that one up, if that's okay. We'll move on to our next item. Thank you for that, Dan. Next one is the complaints to the Housing Ombudsman services by the Council's Landlord Service 23 to 24, pages 43 to 98. I wish it was that easy, Councillor Garner, but it's not. So we will have no presentation on this one as per our agreed format. We will go straight to questions if there are any. If so, please indicate. If not, we will note them. That was easy. Okay, we should have just noted it, Councillor Garner. Noted. Okay. Item 8, the sports facilities engagement and inclusivity. Priscilla and Nikki, thank you very much for your patience this evening. Just like with Dan's previous item, there will be no presentation on this item, but we will go straight to questions if there are any. Please indicate. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. Where do I start? We go with a nice easy one to start with. In the report it says park tennis, look, we received 228,000 in 2023 and 2024. If we've received that funding, why are we still charging residents £5 to use tennis courts? Because I'm assuming that funding, the 228k, is for refurbishing the courts, and I believe that was what the £5 charge was, to keep the upkeep and also refurbish the courts.
Thank you. It was a grant issued by the LTA.
Okay.
In 2019, they started having conversations with us to say that your courts are dire, they're not playable, and they were absolutely right. At the time, perhaps none of the courts had been attended to, and I would say between 10 to 15 years. So people were walking their dogs, allowing their dogs just to do whatever they want to do, playing football. Everything was done perhaps on a tennis court apart from play tennis. The LTA came to us with quite a compelling business case to say, if we invest in your courts, we would quite confidently say that you will get throughput, court hours played, income made, if you did something about that. The long and the short of it is that the council was unable to provide any seed or match funding towards it, so it got to the point where the LTA fully funded the sites within Hillingdon. So as I speak, I think all 10 sites have had, for the first time in a very long time, renovation done. That means a brand new court, new fencing, and new gate systems, which for the first time had a cloud-operated booking system whereby you have to have a PIN code to operate that. The proviso of this from the LTA was that they strongly recommended that a charge be put on for pay and play, not for it to be free. This was because they were saying in the event of needing upkeep, maintenance, and the like, you then have a bit of a sinking fund. Hillingdon was one of several in West London to start with a recommended amount, which was £5 per hour, which was the lowest offer. The decision was made at the time that this needed to happen on the wettest March, that we announced the charge, and therein we've been able to make some income, which now the Green Spaces team take and utilize some of that for any kind of antisocial behaviour that's occurred. People have used all manner of tools to get into the courts, making holes, chopping off the gate access systems, ruining the nets. Nothing comes for free from our perspective, because then we have to replace them. What we have noticed, because we do get regular tracker data on a month-by-month basis, is to then use data to look at tracker information to see what the usage and the number of people playing tennis has been, as well as look at the income as well. So whilst we've now got a new system whereby you can book, that same system allows us to identify user information as well. It's called Club Spark. From that, we aren't able to say 15 years ago people were playing, but we can now say people are still playing tennis. And in fact, in some areas, Cavendish, Rec, Hillingdon Court Park, which are currently being renovated, very, very popular indeed. I am patently aware that there are some places, the closest, Harmondsworth, and I think those in the main, and Rosedale, where there has been antisocial behaviour done because people did not want to come and pay £5. One of the measures that we have put in place is that we have now got with us, working with us, a tennis coaching company. They pay us so that they can offer free tennis provision for families, be it cardio tennis, be it kids tennis, be it tennis for free. So we're offering free tennis opportunities as well as paid for as well.
Councillor Davis?
Thank you for that. The free tennis that you're offering is in Cavendish?
Yes, it is, yes.
So if the antisocial behaviour is in Rosedale and Harmondsworth, why are we not offering it in them areas? Cavendish is already busy, as you've said.
Yes.
Surely if we want the upkeep on the Rosedale, the Harmondsworth, them sort of areas, why are we not offering it there or rotating it?
So thank you. So there are different initiatives. Tennis for Free is an initiative that's set up in 2019, and that was set by a charity that was aligned to LTA. Was originally for 9 to 12-year-olds. Saturday mornings, for an hour and a half, you get free tennis. Fine. That's happening. We then, when we commissioned this, well, we didn't commission, we had on board with us the NTA, which is the National Tennis Association coaching. We said one of the things you need to provide for us is free tennis coaching on a Saturday and a Sunday at Rosedale. As soon as we get these facilities to a really good state, we want to make sure it's attractive to people who didn't even know the park was there, let alone a tennis court. So we have now got free park tennis at Harmondsworth, at Rosedale, and we're looking to put that into Hillingdon Court Park and potentially Moore Hall when that gets renovated. Now, I just wanted to add to that is that it's really important that we don't just pay for instructors to do things, because the pot of money will run out. What we want to do is have local people who are volunteers who are willing to become parks tennis activators. So we are providing free training, DVS, level 1 coaching. They get all of that for free so that they can turn up on a Saturday from their community, and currently we have 6 Brunel University students doing that at Rosedale. So the model is, don't just build and people will come. You build the activation around that, and that's the longer, harder job, but it's more meaningful.
Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor Kaur?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Priscilla, for this. I just wanted to know, it is very impressive list of things that we're doing. The intention which says is sports facilities available throughout the borough with a focus on engagement and inclusivity. So, looking at this list and looking at what's been done and provided, how has the usage of facility changed over time? And have you noted any change in demographics of the users? Do we have any data on how inclusive and engaging this has all been? So whatever we offer, do we have data on demographics as well on this one? Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, we do. And I'd be very happy to share that level of data to the committee or independently. What we do capture, we make sure we have an approach that's a whole system approach. That's very much a public health approach. You don't just do things at people. You first of all identify where are you putting on an activity, what is the need, who is the need for, what is the makeup of the individuals? Are they mainly families? Are they mainly mums who do drop off with kids? What's the affordability? Is it attractive? Is it safe? Is it something that people are interested in? So all of that comes into consideration before we put any programs on. Since I've been manager of this team, I'm just absolutely thrilled with the team that I have. They do the great work, but we make sure that all of us understand engagement first and foremost, our relationship building. We're not perfect at it, but we do understand that's a core principle of how we work. So we capture data. We look at active lives data, which is the only objective measure of how people are active or inactive, and you can get that data across any borough across the country. For children and young people, we're slightly above the London average. For adults, we're not that active. We need to increase our activity rate. So we know that in certain demographic areas, we need to increase our provision. To that end, we offer everything apart from the £5 tennis. We offer everything for free on that list. So, for example, we have London Youth Games, mini marathon, disability sports for children and young people. All of those are held at we pay for hall hire, which is increasing, may I add. We pay for instructor costs, but we make sure we then, for children and young people, we promote through schools, we promote through the local communities where those facilities are held, we promote through social media and through Hillingdon people as well. We then move on to our green space and open space facility, which is outside of our leisure providers, operators. And again, we ensure that when we go out and do marketing or publicity, that we have got our community connectors that we work with, be it in Hayes, or be it in West Drayton, or be it up in Harefield. Harefield is an area that we need to improve. So we have gone out to the Hayes Cycling Legacy Group, and a wonderful lady there. We are now connected to some more Somalian groups and to our GP practices who've got a number of patients who know that they could be benefited from having healthier lives, living more independently. So we look at who is coming through, what is their own subjective measure of how active they are, and after an 8-week, 12-week program, how well are they doing? I would like to say that between 80 to 100% of people say yes, they feel much better, they really enjoy the socializing, they feel physically better, and they want to continue and carry on. Our challenge with some of our programs is that there are so many people, we're having to increase our availability of some of these activities, but with just a very select group of instructors. So it does then come down to, and because we offer everything for free, it's the challenge of how to do more when you have existing funds to deliver.
Councillor Cool.
Thank you, Chair. It would be interesting to see the data, because the few times I've come to the events that you've invited me to, it didn't seem like very inclusive and very engaging. It would be interesting to see how those hard-to-reach communities are now being reached at. As you said, you're using different means, and actually see the tangible results. It will be also interesting how you're able to push this program into the new developments that are coming across in Hillingdon. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you for this, Priscilla. Most of the things I didn't know were going on. Regarding the walks, I occasionally, I live near a lake farm. I wander around there with some Gurkhas sometimes, because they love exercise. Can you let me know? You can send me an email with the 22 where the walks are. You see, there's 22 graded walks to choose from. So you could let me know where they are. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And everything, dare I say, is on the council website. We try to promote as much as possible and as frequently as possible through Hillingdon people as well. We used to put leaflets of all of our walks programs in every GP practice and in all the libraries. There are some things that we've been asked to stop producing. paper form, which I think sometimes has led to some people just not knowing, because it's so much easier to read something when it's in front of you and it's given to you. Not everyone does social media. So I will give you a list, absolutely, and if I have got a leaflet, I will give that leaflet to you as well.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Priscilla. Again, some things have been touched on already. The tennis courts, yes, I've seen, I have submitted MEs trying to get information about the use of tennis courts prior to the fee being introduced and posts, and apparently that data is not available. However, I do know that when my former ward, Rosedale, was being used a lot. I just know it was because I was going around there. I knew it was being used. So I am not entirely surprised that there's resistance to the fact that the fee was introduced at that location. I've also had complaints from residents about the fee in West Drayton as well. So it's not being well received. So as Councillor Davis is saying, if there's any way to to make sure that we are making an offer to areas that have got that resistance, have had that resistance, to negate that fee would be good. One of the other things with two things. One, you've touched about promotion, so we're not issuing physical leaflets, but I know that the council does, and has in the past anyway, utilise the display boards and things in town centres. So things that with us still being done, I don't know, but certainly that has been done in the past to promote activities that the council is offering. So whether that is something that could be revisited. Also, you mentioned about sort of the adult population isn't, I can speak for myself, I'm not particularly active, but then a lot of us have busy lives, so it's not something that is, particularly for councillors, we've got day jobs, and then we do counselling, fitting around that as well. So trying to sort of engage in more activity isn't particularly easy. So what programs or what offerings are you exploring that, and obviously if people want to take up the offer, or they don't, it's down to that, but in terms of trying to encourage that section of our community that isn't able to take up that offer, what are we doing there? Thank you.
Thank you. So the answer is with difficulty. If we look at how we are, without going into too much of a dialogue, how we all operate in society, we are all desk-bound. We get into cars, we get up, we get into cars, we go to an office, we perhaps maybe walk down a high street, get a coffee, get a drink, or whatever we do. We come back into our cars, we go home, we sit with kids, and we watch television. And I think some of that is absolutely a Western society issue. It's certainly the whole nation issue. We're probably one of the most sedentary in Western Europe, probably, in terms of our habits. So lifestyle is a bigger issue. And I think compounded with that is people are busier. Our working lives and patterns are busier as well. So I think it's one of these things, we can do our level best by looking at the data, and we do know that the working population is really tricky to attract, as is teenage girls, as is our older generation as well. So what we perhaps need to consider also is, how do people access their information? And we know that social media, we know that the digital kind of explosion is where a lot of people, the YouTube videos, everything online is an avenue and a support. Where we are, I think, responsible in public health is to keep putting the message out. It's how the message is taken and absorbed, understood, and something is done about that. In terms of getting feedback for, I don't want to do this, but I want to do that, we don't have that kind of feedback mechanism. because the other option that we have is that we have a very good leisure operator. We have facilities there. What we are trying to do is maximize the built environment and the non-built environment as much as we possibly can. There's 3 of us in a team looking at sport and physical activity with a defined budget which hasn't shifted for certainly for the 6 years. So whilst we're doing our level best, and I want to commend my team for having that list that they offer, I think the best that we can do is titrate, respond, and do as much as we can for people if they want to do something, but we need to work in partnership with our leisure operator, but also, may I say, our sports clubs. We're probably one of the few organizations who are trying to keep things free, so it's accessible, it's doorstep, it's local, it's attractive, and it's family oriented. When you then go into leisure centres or clubs, you then start paying a fee. So we have that push and pull. We're trying to do our best. We do put things on the website. We're doing our level best to promote it through social media and our comms teams and Hillingdon people. We work really well with GLL, our partners. We're doing our level best. We could do more, but we have to understand the capacity by which we have it. But that's not to say we don't want feedback, and we do want to understand, if it's not working for people, well, what is it and how is it? We just need to be creative in how we then put that program out again. What we don't want to do is have just 8-week sessions of things. Yeah. We need to have things that are sustainable. And for our walks programs, they've been running for 19 years. Our chair-based exercises have been going for 8 years. Our tea dances have been going for 12 years. There's something good that's happening because people keep coming back and keep coming back. So we know where it has worked, it's worked really well. And sometimes it's actually really difficult to move people off and away from the activity because they find it socially engaging, it's physically really good for them, and it is free. Balancing it all. But we will carry on trying.
Councillor Farley?
No further questions, thank you.
Councillor Davis?
I have 2 questions and that's me done. Right, where should we go first? Outdoor fitness programs. Is there a reason why we're not rotating for all the parks with outdoor gyms? So I can see it's only at Barrow Hall and Harefield, but I know there's a number of parks across the borough that have got outdoor gyms and areas. Why are we not using them?
So just for clarity, the outdoor gym facility is something quite separate to our parks, which is it's a company, it's an organisation, it's a person who comes. They're called parkers, and they come and do an outdoor activity. We pay for that.
Okay.
We pay for their instructor time. We've trialled it in where the actual outdoor gym facilities were. We've been working with this particular agency for a good number of years. We are going to where it's most popular.
Okay, perfect. Chairman, if I may do one. Seated exercise classes. I had a number of residents over the past few months raise some concerns that people have used the service for a long time and have been told now to take a step back, allow new users, to allow new users. I'm assuming that's down to space because we're based in libraries. Why are we not working with GLL to use Botwell Leisure Centre? We have a library there. The Botwell session is 10 to 11 in the morning, so it's not a peak time for them. They have a full fitness suite. They have a full sports hall that potentially isn't used. Is there a reason why we're not using that to allow our regular users to continue with the service?
Thank you. We brought in this change to make our chair-based exercises called chair aerobics. Up until, I think, this May, you could just come for free and keep coming, put your cardigan on the chair and keep coming. Because we in public health are now working a lot more closely with the hospital with physiotherapy services, and falls and frailty is a public health and a health issue, so preventing that rising risk of people falling. What we've had to do is attend to the kind of cohort of individuals that we are now getting from clinical data to say these individuals, we need to get them staying away from hospital into a community-based provision. So We were then tasked to, can you provide strength and balance classes? Can you look at your chair aerobics sessions? We then had to have somewhere where we had throughput. We needed to move people along because people were coming and staying for free, absolutely fine. We were then taking the cost of the instructors. So some of it does come down to instructor costs. We had libraries for free. It's a free facility to enable all of that to happen. So when it comes then to working with partners, then costs do come into whole hire.
But, sorry, Chairman.
And that's something that we can take, but it's something that we have to consider.
But surely for someone like Greenwich Leisure Limited, they have a community programme. So, and if it was a non-peak time, they've got a massive sports hall at Botwell Leisure Centre, which I highly doubt is in use between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. on a Friday. Why have we not? Have we approached them to ask if they have a gesture of goodwill that they can offer? Because I'd be really concerned that yes, we have a programme for core balance and to stop falls, but the ones that don't come back to that service could end up in hospital because they've lost that power. So it's a vicious circle, and I understand you're under constraints. I really do. So I just wonder if we've approached them.
Oh, yes, we have. We have approached them, and we are keeping a very keen eye on numbers through the instructors, just through the numbers of people we're getting on a weekly basis. Some have become extremely popular, even within this new 12-week provision, and others have had a little bit of, especially at Botwell. So we're looking at that. We are looking at how we can address that on a kind of like a week-by-week basis.
Okay.
We want to make sure that it's as free as possible at point of access, as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Lewis. I'll fill the gap then. On the report, Priscilla, I saw no mention of family fishing days. Has that been dropped?
Family fishing wasn't something that our team was participating in, so that was within the Green Spaces team and another colleague who's no longer working in the council. But
you'd still have some involvement with it, with a part of sport participation, no? Or?
We hadn't. It wasn't something that we were historically involved with in the past.
Something to look at separately then, that's fine.
Yeah.
Who's next? Councillor Kaur?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to understand, because these activities are happening in different areas of the boroughs, how can we, as your councillors, support you better? And if, the activities which are taking place specifically in those wards, if you want something from the ward councillors, like we can use our social media spaces, we could use our community spaces, or wherever we go to let people know that this is happening. I think all of the ward councillors probably can chip in and help you out.
Thank you. No, I would take that up completely. And if you want to be in any videos or pictures doing activities in these areas, that'd be super. It's really important to see visibility and people feeling that this is something for them. So we have so many activities happening. Let's say in the Hayes area, we've got Park Run for the first time ever happening. So now we've just had a year's worth of it. And we have hundreds of people coming on a Saturday, and that's absolutely brilliant to see. What we want to see is get more other, particularly Asian families, running and walking. So we've now set up something called Couch to 5K. That's an 8-week program that helps you run in a group, and then you finish in a park run. But it would be great just to have more visibility and more people. So I would really take up that offer. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? In which case, thank you very much, Priscilla and Nick, for your attendance. I would say you're free to go. We're more or less going to be right behind you, I think, so feel free to stick around. Forward plan, Councillor Gardner, thank you. The work programme, item 10. Liz, was there anything you wish to comment on the visits?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to, I sent an email today just to let members know that we have a site visit organised to the recycling facility in Edmonton, which is, apologies for confusion, it's actually on Wednesday the 4th of September, not the Tuesday. and it's going to be from 9:45 to 10:45 on that day. We do need to know as soon as possible, please, who will be attending. We have to organise safety boots, which are compulsory, so I do need to organise them and order them, because I believe there is a bit of a timeline for getting hold of those. And just to confirm that they will not be a wasted expense, because they will be reused by staff members once they're returned by you. So they would be sourced, they would actually be sourced new to make sure that you have ones that fit you. Yeah, so that's the only site visit we've got coming up. But please, if you could just confirm, I appreciate it's a bit of a distance away, but would be grateful if you could let me know who will definitely be coming, so I can get that all sorted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That concludes the business for this evening. Thank you all for your attendance. The meeting is now closed at 14 minutes past 9. Thank you.